EPAWA Weather Consulting, headquartered in Worth Whitehall, Pennsylvania, this is Weather Weeklies, an informative video of the ins and outs of weather that affect you most in the EPAWA coverage area. The thoughts and opinions expressed in this video are those of the forecaster alone and may not reflect those of the staff of EPAWA Weather Consulting LLC as a whole, nor its constituents. Now, without further ado, here is meteorologist Bobby Martrich with Weather Weeklies.
Good morning and welcome to Weather Weeklies for Sunday, November 24th. We have a lot to talk about here in today's video. Again, looking at the longer range pattern going forward into December. We did have our first taste of snowfall this week. For lower elevations, not as much, but we get to the higher elevations. We had some pretty incredible amounts of heavy wet snow and a lot of power outages that went with that. So we're going to discuss where we are and where we're going forward from here. We start off each week with the year-to-date snowfall, and this has gone up. Now, I will tell you that this number here in Scranton-Wilkes-Barre is a little misleading because this is at the airport, which is a much different elevation than Wilkes-Barre itself. Wilkes-Barre is about, I think it's like 550 feet or somewhere around there. The airport itself is 961 feet, so you have a little bit of elevation. This is why you had such vast differences in snowfall from the bottom of the mountains all the way to the top, because we have that elevation made a big difference in the past storm with that upper low capturing the surface low, causing to retrograde. But we did have snow across the most of the region, at least snowflakes flying, and that got all the way down to Philadelphia, where they did in fact record a trace of snow there. Trace just means it wasn't measurable, but it might have been enough to it was physically snowing, so you had, in some cases, in and around some of these areas. Like I know, I live just north of Allentown. We did have a coating of snow on the grass, at least briefly, and then it warmed up in the afternoon and it disappeared. So it was not considered measurable at the airport. That's why they have a trace. This is where we should be year-to-date, so because of that number here at the Wilkes-Barre Airport being higher, it's well above average there, but everywhere else is still at least slightly below average. But again, for the month of November, you're really not expecting that much anyway. But you're going to end up obviously over here in the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre area and many areas across the higher elevations, northeast, Mount Pocono, Tobyhanna. There's a lot of places up there, Lackawanna County. I think Uniondale up in Susquehanna County did very well too. So there's a lot of places that got some, in some cases, well over a foot of snow, and that caused a lot of problems with power outages, the heavy weight on these trees and power lines, and they're still recovering from that this morning. So here is what we go up into December. See, December is a notable increase in snowfall, and our latest projection actually is for slightly above average snowfall in the month of December. So we're going to cover that extensively today. I do want to get to the Thanksgiving storm first, because there's been a lot of talk about possibly a winter storm for that. The trends have been in the direction of against that, where from at least for most of the region, you might get some snow to start here in the higher elevations nearest the New York-Pennsylvania border when you get above I-80 in Pennsylvania, where it may start off as snow, but this is pretty much settling on an idea that this is trending milder, or at least mild enough to support rain in this case. This would be late Thursday night and during the day here on Thanksgiving. So it will be wet for Thanksgiving, but and there is an opportunity for things to change. This could turn colder with time, but the ensembles are pretty much in the 40s for this, so it's going to be tough for things to change in a big way. But after this system exits, you have a lot of cold air ready to come in behind this system. This is our pattern-changing system, that to the point where we're going to have quite a considerable difference behind this. We're going to follow this in the local forecast or daily forecast videos that I do every single day. Beginning on Monday, we'll have this the latest trends with this. But right now, the trend is in the favor of milder. And if you're up here in interior New England, this could be a pretty good hit for you. But for our area here specifically, it looks like most of it's going to be rain until you get above I-80, where you can start off as snow, and there too go over to rain at some point during the day on Thanksgiving Day. This doesn't look like a huge system in terms of impact, so not as much quantitative precipitation as the last one we just had, but this could certainly add to it. And if nothing else, it's still, I know we had a decent amount of rainfall with that last system, or liquid equivalent, but we can still use a little bit more, and this will certainly help with that regard. Prior to this, there's going to be a cold front come through Monday night and a Tuesday morning. That probably gives you about a quarter inch or less, though. Not a lot of precipitation with that. So let's get over. We start off with the ENSO look in here, and looking for La Nina, and we're playing Where's Waldo with this, because it is not going in the right direction for La Nina. La Nina needs to be lower than negative zero point 0.5 degrees Celsius of an ONI index is the average sea surface temperatures in the equatorial eastern Pacific, and they have gone up this week, or either remained unchanged or gone up, and you're on either side here of 0 degrees Celsius. You need to be at negative zero point 0.5 or lower in order to be in a La Nina. We're going to go in the other direction. And I think this is just a temporary because of the some westerly wind bursts and some warming in the eastern portions of the Nino regions, especially. Nino 1 and 2 is now above 0, okay, which is neutral, right? So we are solidly in an ENSO neutral, and there's still no signs that we are going to be in a La Nina anytime soon. So we were talking about this over the last couple of weeks, and I was trying to make a case here that, hey, they're expecting between September and November a 60% chance of La Nina developing. Well, it didn't. Today said it's the 24th, and this past week went in the other direction. I can tell you this is done every single Monday morning, and I can tell you that for this graphic is from the CPC, and I can tell you since then nothing's really changed toward colder again. So it's going to remain the same. That means the remainder of this month is going to remain an ENSO neutral. Likely all of December does as well. There's an outside chance you might get reached. You might reach a weak La Nina as we get into January, but it's an outside chance at this point because the models are now suggesting away from that. They're literally showing the cooler side of neutral, but still not making this negative 0.5 degree Celsius threshold in the equatorial eastern Pacific in order to classify this as a La Nina. So I've been skeptical this entire time. I remain skeptical, probably even more so than before. This is the latest November update here. You can see that most guidance, the vast majority of guidance is keeping this. Here's that negative 0.5 degrees Celsius line. There's a few that are below that, but the vast majority are up here in this ENSO neutral area. This is a negative ENSO neutral, but it's still in neutral territory. So that's going to change the ball game for not only the intraseasonal outlooks, because an ENSO neutral is a very, it can go either way depending on what teleconnections are present at that time, and I'll get to that here in a second. But these models here, and especially this mean, this red line that dips into a briefly into a La Nina here during the winter months, is skewed by something like this model here, which is the NASA model that is way off base, obviously. So the dynamical average is actually lowered a little bit. So otherwise, if you take that out of there and throw that out as an outlier, because it clearly isn't happening, then that too is suggesting we remain an ENSO neutral. So ENSO neutral winters paintbrush looks like this. So it's a lot different from what the winter outlooks were projecting. A lot of I would say about 90 to 95% of winter outlooks that were released, especially way too early in fall, because they start releasing those like in August, September already. They are way too early, and they were projecting that La Nina would be reached by now. Well, it's not. Okay, this can has been kicked down the road, and here we are now heading in December, still very solidly in ENSO neutral. So that is going to mess up these winter outlooks that were based on a La Nina and the presence of a southeast ridge down here at times, pumping up this ridge and bringing you warmth. Well, that's not happening now. Not saying you can never get a southeast ridge influence at any point this winter. That is possible, but it's not going to be as nearly as frequent as you would see if you're staying in ENSO neutral. This is a paintbrush, just like that. I don't like these paintbrush ones because it's suggesting that we're going to have cold episodes and a snowy pattern in an ENSO neutral. It certainly can be, but you're going to have to rely, in an ENSO neutral, you rely on other factors to run the show other than the background state, and that's asking a lot. So everything has to cooperate with the ridging out west. You could have negative EPO, blocking in Greenland. There's a lot of different things that go into that, and of course your Matt and Julian oscillation cycles. These are all going to run the show in an ENSO neutral because the background state's not going to do it. Okay, so it's going to take other factors. Here's those regions that I was talking about. You see a lot of the oranges showing up in here in addition to the blue. So this is kind of a pretty mix, which makes it balanced near neutral in this area. It's actually warmed a little bit here in the eastern portions near the Peruvian coast. That's the Nino 1 and 2 regions, and I have this lined up in the scale what these regions are. Nino 3 warmed this week. Nino 4 stayed about the same. It's been neutral or very slightly positive. But this area is not looking like it did just a few weeks ago. It's actually warmer than it has been. You can see that here on the 15-day change. You see a lot more of these oranges colors showing up here, which means that has been warming in those regions. And we can see that on this chart that I did here. You can see the changes from last week. It has gone up. Okay, so it's not heading toward a La Nina anytime soon. So we're going to continue to follow this every single week, but I just wouldn't expect it right now. I really don't think. I'm honestly thinking that we're not going to be in a La Nina this winter at all, and we're never going to reach it. It's going to stay in a neutral, and that means other things are going to guide the pattern, which is like the Madden-Julian oscillation, where the best convection is along the equator, to going all the way back to the eastern coast of Africa here, going straight across the ocean. These are the different phases. Okay, and you have a big warm pole that I've noted that was going to be that's sitting right out here in this area. Okay, typically in a La Nina, it's just stuck here and that's it. So it's because it's heading in this direction here, and you have all this warm water to tap into. You know, we could have episodes a lot where they dominate in winter, further into winter, where they're hanging out in here, where I have the arrow pointing to these regions instead, which latent heat release processes from that convection, which is thunderstorms, affects the ridge and the position of the ridges. Okay, now everybody was saying that you're not going to have a negative EPO this winter like we had in 2013, 2014. I still don't think we do to that extent, but everybody was making a big deal about this cold pool that was sitting up here, and you're going to have a negative PDO, and we're not going to have ridging in Alaska because there's some cold waters up there, at least relative to average. Well, we're seeing right now that is not the case. This is current, okay? And right now we have a negative EPO. And going forward, it's leaning on the negative side of neutral here, going forward here in the next couple of weeks. So, you know, that you can throw that argument right out the window. The PDO is going to ruin this winter. PDO is an overrated teleconnection, in my opinion. But you know, this can certainly help the pattern if it's negative. You know, certainly stay on the cooler side of average. And in an ENSO neutral, you're going to need something like this to happen, or else you're going to torch. And I'll get to that here in a bit too. Okay, so back to the Madden-Julian oscillation. These are different phases, and this is what the latest guidance has for both the GFS, the GFS ensemble, extended ensemble, and on the right is the European Weeklies, or what used to be called the Weeklies, now the European Extended, okay? Now, notice they're doing two different things. They're both bringing us into Phase 5 right here, and it meanders in Phase 5 for a little bit on the GEFS ensembles before heading into Phase 6, whereas the European ensemble takes it through very slowly through Phase 5, and then collapses it into the circle of death. Two different options there, but they have big implications, not on the first half of winter, which they both agree on, but the second half, or December, not winter. The first half of December, they pretty much agree. It's once you get into the second half of December, then they split into two different directions, because this, Phase 5, in an ENSO neutral, which we now know it's going to be, not La Nina, at least not in December, is a colder phase, and that's why we're going to have those colder temperatures. You move into Phase 6, however, it's a milder phase, okay? So this has huge implications. Whether this is correct, we're going to head into milder temperatures to end December, or you're going to stay kind of status quo, coming from Phase 5 and collapsing the circle of death. You have lingering effects from the previous phase, which is Phase 5 in this case, that can linger a little bit longer and keep you into a whatever that pattern is. And in this case, the pattern is colder, okay? So that's why the European model is different in the extended range. And this is a good example of that. Here's the European Weeklies. Has that very cold temperatures to start December. It does abate a little bit, but it still stays near to slightly below average going all the way into early January, this entire run. And this is at the end of January. When you get into January, you're getting into the coldest time climatological of the year. So if you're near to, you don't have to be below average necessarily to get snow at that point. But you know, you're still leaning on the cooler side of average here on the European extended, and that's because it's not taking it straight through Phase 6, which is a milder phase, right? Now look at the GFS extended. Look what it does. It erodes the cold, and by the time you get to the end of December, it is slightly above average, okay? So that's because of this, because of the way this is going. This is continuing into Phase 6 here, which again is a milder phase, all right? So it's going to come down to this and where this progresses into, I think, and that's going to be a big part of it. But also, again, the teleconnections are running the show. The EPO right now, the reason for this cold coming in is a lot to do with the EPO being negative. And everybody was telling me, you're not going to have a negative EPO dominate this year like you did in 2013, 2014. And no, I don't think you're going to have it dominate to that extent, because that was months upon months on end where you had a negative EPO running the show that year. And we had a lot of snow from that, a lot of cold and snow. Does that mean it's going to happen again this year? I don't think so. I think you're going to have times of this where it's going below or it's staying negative, and it's not going to be constant. It will go positive at times, and you will have negative times. I told you going into this winter, these previous Weather Weeklies videos that I do, that you're going to have these ups and downs, right? You might have one week where it's cold, next week it might be back warmer again, or milder anyway, not warm, but milder. Then it goes right back down to cold and snowy again, and that's a lot to do with what the EPO is about. We have ridging into Alaska, which everybody was saying was going to happen because you have that cold water up there, right? You get a cross-polar flow that comes down to the United States and bleeds into our region, and that's what's going to be happening after that Thanksgiving storm leaves. If it is a positive EPO, it's the opposite effect, where you have a low in the Gulf of Alaska, and that just floods the whole nation here with milder air, mild Pacific air, and you have no cross-polar flow here in this case. So again, in an ENSO neutral, you're looking at other things to run the show, not the background state. And a lot of these winter outlooks were written expecting a weak La Nina, which can run the show, especially with that southeast ridge. But this is going to be, in an ENSO neutral, it's going to be dependent on teleconnections like this, like the blocking in Greenland. Is that going to be a factor too? We talked about that in previous weeks here. If you have any blocking, that's going to certainly help. Now, blocking shouldn't be as prevalent this year, because we're going to have a stronger polar vortex, we think, and the QBO is not really in a good phase for ample blocking, but you can get this at times. It's not like you're not going to have it at all. You're going to have some blocking episodes, just not to the extent that you had even last year. Okay, so that is the pattern going forward. We know, and again, this is the first week, or first half of December here is going to be colder than average, and very notably so. Here is the taking the Allentown Lehigh Valley International Airport region, which is the centermost point of our coverage area, as an example, and you can see average high here goes from 50 today. On December 8th, it is 45. That's the average high on both of those days, and you see the line going down here where over the next couple of weeks, what average does. The red line indicates what average is, but you notice here's the Thanksgiving time frame where you're still a little bit too mild for any kind of wintry precipitation with this, unless it came in overnight and it was cold enough to support it. You might get a few flakes at the onset, and that's it, and that's going to go over to rain, it looks like. But after the storm exits, look at these temperatures just dropping. These are January highs here that we're going to be getting in early December, and they were talking about temperatures in the middle 30s here. I mean, that's a pretty cold shot here. And at some point in here, we have a couple storm signals listed here this week that we did not have prior. There's going to be some snow events in here. I just don't know exactly have this, because I have the 4th and 5th listed as the first one. It might end up being the 6th or thereabout. There's something in there in this time frame right in here for the first winter storm signal. And then we have another one that I talked about in previous videos that I wasn't confident enough to put in it as a long range signal yet, because it was too far of a range. But we put one right around the middle of the month too, because I really think you're gonna have something there too. And if you have colder temperatures relative to average in place, that's half the battle. That's half the battle. Okay, you need to get those in place first. Not marginal. This is marginal stuff around Thanksgiving. I'm talking about this stuff when you get in here, where it can be more conducive for seeing snowfall. And so I do think you're going to have some opportunities there, and so does the European extended. This is for the month of December, and these numbers are at least slightly above average for the ensemble mean snowfall for the entire month. This is combining 50 individual members and blending them together, the different outcomes of each model, and blending them together to form a mean. And you can see these numbers, even as a mean, are above average here. So that's why we have, even though we have near to slightly below average precipitation as terms of quantitative precipitation for the month of December, most of that falls as snow because you have these temperatures cooperating here at this point, and therefore you get this. And that extends all the way down to the I-95 corridor too and beyond. So you do have the opportunity here for some snowfall here in December, and that's why we have that projection for near to slightly below average temperature, actually slightly below average temperature solidly, 2 to 4 degrees below Fahrenheit below average in December, and we also have slightly above average snowfall. Okay, so we're looking at that being a possibility. We have winter storm signals we identified. There's a couple here. Here's in that 4th to 6th time frame right in here. You get some popping up in there, but it's really once you get out to this middle of the month period where it starts really picking up, and that's why you have those winter storm signals. These are just favorable time periods that we're trying to keep an eye on and monitor closely because the cold air is going to be there, and we also have some ensemble signals running around. It might not be it's never a guarantee for a snowstorm at any given location, but with at least there's the opportunity there going forward that we'll have at least opportunity for some snowfall here at that point. And the reason I'm making a big deal about that is because, one, a lot of you really like snow. Some people hate it, and I get that. But there's also, if you look at the past, I don't know, 5-6 years, you really haven't had a start to winter like this, where you had cold in place ahead of Christmas. Usually it's been torchy or at least kind of mild, slightly milder than average or something going into December, and December hasn't really been cold in a long time. So if you have the cold in place, again, that's half the battle, but we haven't had it looks like this in a while. We haven't had that prior to the holidays, okay? So this is a big deal because it is the holiday season, and we have to make sure we stay on top of these winter storms going forward. Once you get into December, it's a lot easier than this marginal stuff we've been dealing with here in November. We had snow falling in a lot of places the other day, but it wasn't sticking too well. When you get into here, especially if it's below average, and you have snow falling, it's probably sticking at this point. So keep that in mind. Climatologically, we're heading into a period where it's more prone to snowfall, and that's why you see these average snowfall numbers go up here in December considerably from what they are in the month of November. Okay, so we're going to just summarize here. We're watching the Thanksgiving storm for potential impacts, but it's looking mild outside of elevations. Again, the elevations we get up around I-80 or north, especially, could start off with some snow Wednesday night or into Thursday morning, and then it goes over to rain there too. But it's looking like, for the most part, it's going to be a mild system that's going to bring some rain showers here on Thursday, but we're going to watch that more closely in the daily forecast videos. Okay, this is not the venue for that. I did want to make a mention of it, but with the daily forecast videos that I do Monday through Saturday, we'll cover that in a little bit more detail. Cold temperatures relative to average settle in after this storm exits. Okay, so that's Black Friday onward, and it will remain in place for a while, probably through at least the first half of December. Once we get to the second half of December, we'll see where we go from here. Again, the GFS ensemble, extended ensemble, and the European extended ensemble are going in two different directions based on the Madden-Julian oscillation cycle. So we'll have to see where that goes here in the coming weeks. And two time periods of interest and winter storm signal periods to monitor were introduced this week. One is toward the end of the first week of December. The other one is toward the end of the second week of December, when you get toward the middle of the month. So we're going to watch those time periods with a vested interest and see where we go. It's not a guarantee that we're going to get a winter storm in a particular time frame. It could end up being cold and dry. That's certainly possible too, but we'll see. I'd really like at least some potential for these signals to work out, and so do the ensembles here going out here that are going to see at least some snowfall. This goes all the way through the first week of January. You can see there's accumulated snowfall at that point just on every single one of them, but we do think we're going to be at least slightly above average snowfall in the month of December. One last thing, the My Pocket Meteorologist text alerts and premium forum. A lot of you signed up for that this past week with that snow. We're going to have plenty of more opportunities going forward. So if you follow the link that's either right here, this one right here, or if you see that scrolling ticker across the top here in yellow, that also has the address there. It's been there throughout the video. You can go there to sign up for the Text Alerts and Premium Forum, and you'll get ahead of all of the winter potential here in the coming months. I'm EPAWA meteorologist Bobby Marchers. That is this edition of Weather Weeklies for Sunday, November 24th. Once again, next week, we'll be talking about December, as we'll be in December at that point. Take care.